Welcome to your new home, a place you won't be leaving anytime soon. Let's start with the good news. You don't need to be insane to end up in a Victorian asylum. The bad news? You're here anyway. There are countless ways to arrive, most of them silent. You don't recall screaming. Maybe you didn't. Perhaps you were too stunned to protest as they draped your coat over your shoulders with mock gentleness, as if this were some act of kindness. One moment, you were pacing your room, weeping into your tea, or questioning your place in the world. The next, you're seated in a carriage flanked by men who refuse to meet your gaze. They don't need you to be violent, just vulnerable. If you're a woman, the threshold for commitment is so low it might as well be buried underground. Did you speak too freely? Mourn too long after childbirth? Refuse a marriage proposal? You're not willful, you're hysterical. If you're a man, perhaps you drank too much, lost your job, or spoke to God in the streets one too many times. And if you're poor, it's even simpler. Your mind is a luxury no one cares to protect. One confused outburst, one night without shelter, and congratulations, you're no longer society's concern. You're the asylum's. The legal process is effortless. A husband, brother, father, or convenient neighbor fills out a petition. A doctor, usually one who's never met you, signs a certificate declaring you of unsound mind. No second opinion. No defense. Just like that, you're no longer a citizen. You're a patient. Or more accurately, a problem that's been politely swept away. The journey itself is grim. They claim it's for your own good, but that doesn't explain why no one dares utter the word asylum aloud. Euphemisms abound. Rest home, sanatorium, place of healing. You notice none of your chaperones seem at ease. They clutch their hats as if the wind might steal them. The driver stays silent, and the horse, you swear, knows exactly where you're headed. When the building finally appears, it defies expectations. Not some Gothic monstrosity, but something stately, almost warm. Red brick towers, ivy-clad walls, broad stone steps leading to double doors. It resembles a university more than a prison, but the illusion shatters the moment the doors close behind you. The exterior's warmth was architectural. Inside, the chill is institutional. Stone floors, iron bars, the stench of coal smoke, bleach, and something rotting slowly in the walls. No tea is offered. No explanations given. They take your name, your clothes, and your dignity in that order. The garments they provide are thick and scratchy, like wearing someone else's skin. Laces and belts are forbidden too many accidents. If you're a woman, your hair might be sheared short. If you're a man, your pockets are sewn shut. Personal items, books, jewelry, photographs are confiscated. You're now a ward of the asylum, a body to manage, an entry in a ledger. They lead you to the admissions ward, a long corridor lined with iron radiators that emit no heat. The windows are high and narrow, like slits in a fortress wall. The light filtering through is pale and dust-choked, casting everything in a drowned, lifeless hue. Other patients pass by. Some stare. Some mutter. Some don't move at all. A woman stands rigid against the wall, whispering to her own fingers. A man nearby hums tunelessly, his face smeared with something that might have been food or blood. Don't worry, they tell you. They're in different stages of recovery. You're not sure what that means, but you know you'll join them soon. Once admitted, you're examined, not gently. A doctor, always male, always weary, inspects your eyes, teeth, and hands. He may ask a few questions, but your answers don't seem to matter. He scribbles something in a heavy ledger and nods to the orderly. That's it. Your identity, your history, your side of the story, irrelevant. What matters now is your behavior. Or rather, your ability to mimic the kind of behavior that won't get you restrained. Here's the truth. Once inside, every action you take is evidence. Cry, and you're unstable. Protest, and you're violent. Smile too much, and you're delusional. Stay quiet, and you're depressed. The walls don't just contain you, they define you. You'll be diagnosed retroactively based on how well you play the role they've assigned. Some patients surrender quietly, almost gratefully. They're exhausted. Life outside was too loud, too cruel, too sharp-edged. The asylum, for all its horrors, is at least predictable. 3 meals, a bed, a place to vanish. Others fight. They scream, kick, beg for someone to listen. It always ends the same. Restraints, sedation, a note in the file labeling you combative. The kind of note that ensures you'll stay for a very long time. Eventually, you're led to your ward, a long hall of identical doors marked with metal numbers. Your room is small, a cot, a chamber pot, a thin blanket. There's no lock on the inside of the door. There doesn't need to be. You won't leave without help, and help isn't coming. You sit on the bed and stare at the wall. You think of the people who brought you here. Will they visit? Did they mean it when they promised to write? You think of the last time someone asked how you felt and actually cared about the answer. You wait for an explanation of what comes next. None comes. Eventually, you stop asking because here, you learn quickly. The more you ask, the more broken they think you are. And broken things don't leave. Now that you've arrived, let's discuss why you're here. Or rather, why the doctors say you're here. Diagnosing mental illness in the Victorian era is less science, more spinning a wheel to see what kind of crazy sticks. What matters isn't what's truly wrong with you, but what someone else has decided counts as wrong. If you're a woman, the most common diagnosis is hysteria, not because you're hysterical in any modern sense, but because you had the misfortune of being born with a uterus. The theory goes like this. Your womb is unhappy, and instead of expressing this through pain or bleeding like a normal organ, it wanders through your body, disrupting everything in its path, your lungs, liver, even your brain. If this sounds absurd, that's because it is. Yet this imaginary migration, hysteria, from the Greek for womb, remains the go-to explanation for everything from mood swings to migraines to, heaven forbid, independent thought. Symptoms include nervousness, insomnia, shortness of breath, fainting, irritability, excessive talking, not talking enough, being too interested in sex, not being interested at all, and, most crucially, disagreeing with your husband. Treatment ranges from sedation to isolation or, if you're lucky, weeks of bed rest while strangers monitor your every sigh. Some enthusiastic practitioners might suggest a pelvic massage to induce hysterical paroxysm, Victorian medical slang for an orgasm. Your doctor may be alarmingly eager to administer this himself. You should not be. If you're a man, your odds of being diagnosed with hysteria are lower, but don't worry, other labels await. You might be deemed melancholic, a polite term for sadness that makes others uncomfortable. Maybe you lost your job, your wife died, or you drink too much because the factory you work in is killing you slowly, and the air tastes like coal. None of that matters. What matters is that you've stopped functioning as society demands. You're not productive. You're not cheerful. Worst of all, you've stopped pretending. That makes you a liability. Melancholia is a broad diagnosis. It can mean depression, anxiety, grief, guilt, or just being slow in the mornings. Victorian doctors classify it as both a spiritual and physical ailment, a weakness of character and body. Treatment includes cold baths, forced labor, and being told to cheer up by men with mustaches who haven't smiled since the Crimean War. If your melancholia involves religious guilt or delusions, they might pray over you. If it comes with suicidal thoughts, they'll lock you in a barred room and hope the feeling passes. Spoiler, it usually doesn't. Then there's the most feared diagnosis of all, masturbation. Yes, you heard correctly. In Victorian medicine, it's not just frowned upon, it's treated as a literal disease. It's treated as a literal disease, a degenerative, brain-melting, soul-corrupting illness that can only end in madness and death. The prevailing theory claims self-pleasure drains your body of vital fluids, disrupts the nervous system, and causes everything from memory loss to curvature of the spine. Symptoms include laziness, acne, excessive daydreaming, a fondness for solitude, and most damning, any mention of trousers after 9 p.m. Doctors genuinely believed masturbation was the gateway to insanity. Entire asylum wings were filled with self-abusers, and treatments were creative in the worst possible way. Metal cages to prevent access, ice baths to shock away temptation, electric shocks to the genitals, surgical interventions for the especially persistent circumcision without anesthetic or, in severe cases, clitoridectomy. Because nothing says mental health like medically sanctioned assault. Most diagnosed weren't chronic offenders, but lonely teenagers caught in private moments, widows, invalids, or simply people who asked for too much privacy. The logic was circular. You showed signs of degeneration, and since masturbation caused degeneration, you must be guilty. It wasn't about what you'd done. It was about what your body suggested you might do. Other diagnoses rounded out the field. moral insanity for those too cheerful while poor, religious mania for excessive prayer, monomania for single-topic obsessions, puerperal insanity if postpartum depression lasted more than a few days. Then there were idiocy and imbecility, both clinical terms then, used for everything from congenital disabilities to poor grades. The categories blurred, labels stuck. Once assigned, they rarely came off. And let's not forget the catch-all, mania. Agitated? Manic. Aggressive? Manic. Too loud? Manic. Escape attempts meant violent. Fast speech meant delusional. These weren't symptoms, they were excuses. Once written in your file, every twitch became proof. You were no longer a person with a story, you were a condition on legs. There was no appeal, no chance to clarify. Explanations were symptoms. Tears meant instability. Silence meant catatonia. Laugh at the absurdity? That was inappropriate emotional effect, another reason to keep you longer. Diagnosis wasn't the start of treatment. It was the start of containment. All this unfolded under Victorian respectability, an era obsessed with surface order, where madness wasn't a sickness to understand but a stain to scrub away. The asylum didn't aim to heal you. It aimed to render you quiet. If silence required sedation, starvation, humiliation, or invasive corrections, well, that was just the price of decency. You might wonder how many of these diagnoses would apply today. The answer? Nearly all. Anxiety, depression, gender nonconformity, ADHD, homosexuality, grief in the Victorian Asylum, all were causes for alarm. The more you thought, felt, or questioned, the more insane you became. And once labeled, it became the lens through which everyone saw you. You were no longer Alice, who lost her child. No longer Thomas, who saw too much and more. Not someone hurting, someone mad. And to the system, that difference was everything. From the outside, it didn't look so bad. The asylum rose from the countryside like a stately university or manor house. Red brick and symmetry, ivy clinging to walls, freshly cut lawns, a broken fountain. For a moment, you might think it a place of peace. Time to rest, read by a window, reflect. Then the gates closed behind you, and the peace felt less like comfort, more like containment. The building was unnecessarily large, the kind of vast that made you feel smaller with every step. It followed the Kirkbride plan, a theory where the architecture itself was part of the cure. Fresh air, long halls, symmetry, you'd heal just by existing within it. It sounded pleasant until you realized the truth. You'd entered a maze designed by people who thought your brain could be fixed with silence. The farther from the entrance, the more dangerous they deemed you. You didn't know your wing yet, but the hallway felt too long. You walked under high ceilings, past endless identical doors, each numbered. No names. Names implied individuality. You'd surrendered that at intake. The walls were painted in lifeless beige, gray, or olive, colors meant to calm, but delivering only apathy. The floors were stone or wood, always cold, always echoing. Every step announced itself. Sneaking was impossible. Your room, if it deserved the name, was sparse, an iron-framed bed with a thin mattress, a chamber pot, a small empty table. The window was high and barred, offering a view of brick wall if you stood on the bed. The furniture seemed designed to break you slowly, stiff chairs, unyielding tables. No softness, no personal touches. You might as well live in a storage closet designed by someone who'd never had a feeling in their life. The corridors were long, straight, and disorienting. Left became right. Time turned abstract. You passed the same rusted radiator 5 times a day, wondering if you were walking in circles. But no, the building just repeated itself, like it was trying to erase you. You heard everything. Privacy didn't exist. Footsteps echoed from unseen hallways. Whispers bounced off walls, reaching you hours after they were spoken. At night, the building groaned, from pipes, walls, or maybe the people. You stopped asking. Most sounds had no origin. Some, you suspected, weren't sounds at all. Daylight filtered weakly through windows, directionless, not real sunlight, but the idea of sunlight, described to a committee that had never been outdoors. Night brought gas lamps or lanterns, their glow inconsistent, sometimes near darkness. Sometimes lights stayed on to prevent self-harm, they claimed, though it mostly kept you awake. Outside, there were gardens. If you behaved, you could walk them. Gravel paths, hedges trimmed into unidentifiable shapes, modest flowers, if any. No vibrant colors to inspire joy. Trees were spaced for surveillance, not shade. You felt eyes on you even when alone, especially when alone. Rules were unwritten. Walk too fast? Agitated. Too slow? Sullen. Prolonged eye contact? Confrontational. Avoided? Withdrawn. The building didn't correct you, it watched, then recorded. An orderly would jot a note about your posture, earning you another week in observation. Bathrooms were communal. Dignity didn't apply. You shared hole-punched benches, cold wash basins, tin tubs dragged out on bath days. The water was always cold. Soap was optional. Privacy? Non-existent. Cleanliness was theoretical. On bad days, the hallway stench made you forget fresh air. Sound became a weapon. The building carried it, distorted it, fed it back like a twisted lullaby. A cry 2 wards over sounded like it was in your room. Your own thoughts echoed too loudly, mistaken for others. Screams became routine. Laughter lost its meaning. Silence, when it came, was worse. If lucky, you'd be assigned to a wing with a chapel, a gothic thing of dark wood and stained glass suffering. You were encouraged to pray, not for healing but repentance. Madness was still a moral failing. Your sin might have been pride, sloth, or simply failing to smile on command. Here, God watched too. Or so they said. You began sensing the structure's intent. This place wasn't designed to help you find yourself. It was designed to make you forget you had a self. The sameness, the echoes, the blank spaces where joy should live all served a purpose. You were being erased, gently, with architecture. Visitors, if they came, marveled at the building's grandeur, the high ceilings, pleasant grounds, the order. They didn't hear the woman who hadn't spoken in weeks. Didn't see the man staring unblinking at a wall. They'd leave thinking you were in good hands. You'd watch them go through a too small window, wondering if they saw you wave. The asylum was beautiful like a sealed tomb, symmetrical, stately, permanent. You, however, were none of those things. You were a patient, a temporary disruption. And this place was very, very good at outlasting disruptions. You wake to the sound of jangling keys, not an alarm, not a gentle knock. The metallic clatter stops just outside your door, followed by footsteps that pause too close for comfort. The orderly doesn't say good morning. He doesn't speak at all. He merely opens the door a crack, a silent reminder that you don't control it, then walks away, expecting you to follow. This is how your day begins, not with light or warmth, but with permission to exist outside your cell. The hallway is unchanged from yesterday, same pale walls, same faint stench of bleach, coal dust, and something less definable. The odor of too many people surviving in close quarters for too long. You shuffle in line with the others toward the dining hall, heads down, voices muted. Speaking is a privilege here, one easily revoked. So you memorize the cracks in the floor instead. Breakfast is served in a cavernous room where sound gets swallowed by wooden benches and soundproof walls. The food is technically edible if you're feeling generous. Cold porridge and chip bowls, no sugar, no fruit, just soggy oblivion. Sometimes rock-hard bread, always stale. If you're lucky, weak tea. If not, lukewarm water. You eat in silence, surrounded by dozens doing the same. Some stare blankly, others tremble, struggling to lift spoons. Staff patrol like prison guards, watching for spills, disobedience, any twitch that could be labeled madness. After breakfast, you return to the ward, unless you're part of the work program. Then you're escorted elsewhere, because the asylum runs on unpaid patient labor. You've become part of its machinery. Laundry duty means scrubbing sheets stained with unspoken things. Kitchen work means peeling potatoes until your hands blister. If they trust you, a dangerous kind of attention, you might weed gardens under watchful eyes. They call work therapeutic, productive hands quiet the mind. But the real purpose is control. When your muscles ache and your spirit drains, you're less likely to resist, to think. The asylum doesn't want you lively, it wants you manageable. If you're not working, options are bleak. You walk corridors slowly, sudden movements invite suspicion. You sit in the day room's hard chairs, where comfort goes to die. You stare out windows at the same brick wall, the same sliver of distant green that never gets closer. Sometimes you watch other patients, the woman rocking endlessly, the man muttering into his sleeve, the one who hasn't moved in hours. You don't speak to them. Speaking draws attention, and attention here is rarely good. Lunch arrives at noon, marginally warmer than breakfast. Boiled vegetables reduced to mush. Greasy stew with meat of questionable origin. You eat because you're hungry, not because you enjoy it. Enjoyment isn't part of the routine. The afternoon brings more silence. No music, no books, no stimulation. Doctors believe it agitates the mind. Better to keep things dull. Predictable. Tuesdays and Thursdays mean group prayer. Wednesdays bring visiting physicians who prod you with questions, then scribble in your file without looking up. Rain means staying indoors. Sun means walking in circles in the yard until a bell herds you back inside. You don't choose. Choice isn't part of your treatment plan. The rest of the day is spent pacing, not for pleasure, but because there's nothing else to do. You count steps between doors, trace cracks in walls, watch spiders rebuild the same web in the same corner. For a moment, you envy them. At least spiders have purpose. At least they build something. Dinner comes early. Boiled cabbage. Bread. Sometimes a cheese scrap at the staff for celebrating something you'll never be invited to. Then it's back to your room. The bed is still hard. The blanket still thin. You climb under it fully dressed. Undressing would require energy you don't have, and the air bites with cold. The key turns in your door. They'll claim it's for your safety, but it's really for theirs. Night in the asylum is louder than you'd expect. People talk to themselves. Cry out. Scream. Someone kicks a wall down the hall. Another sobs into a pillow. You lie still, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what quiet felt like before this, how your name sounded when spoken kindly. Sleep comes reluctantly. The mattress sags. The blanket scratches. Your body aches from labor, but your mind won't shut down. It loops the same questions. How long have I been here? How much longer will they keep me? What did I even do to deserve this? Exhaustion eventually wins, but rest is a loose term. You wake sweating, heart pounding, unsure if that scream was real or memory. Then morning comes again. The keys. The corridor. The cold porridge. The silence. This is the routine. It doesn't change. It's not meant to. The goal isn't to help you feel better. It's to break you until you fit their mold. Until your madness is quiet enough to ignore, or your sanity is quiet enough to doubt. So you walk. You work. You wait for release, redemption, for someone to realize you were never sick, just overwhelmed. But no one comes. The doors stay closed. The clock keeps ticking. The routine continues, not because it heals, but because it's easier to manage a schedule than a soul. When you were first admitted, someone likely used the word therapy with a straight face. They spoke of healing, of treatments administered with care by professionals. You might have imagined conversations, kindness, a doctor who actually listened. What you got instead was an arsenal of procedures that felt more like punishment dressed up in Latin terminology. The goal here was never to make you well. It was to make you easier to manage. Your first therapy might be the restraint chair, a wooden throne with leather straps for arms, legs, chest, and sometimes even your forehead. The official explanation? To calm you, help you focus, prevent harm to yourself or others. The reality? It's used when you speak too loudly, ask too many questions, or refuse food with the wrong expression. They strap you in and leave you. Hours, days. You stop screaming because you're too exhausted. Eventually, you stop resisting, not because you feel better, but because you've learned what happens if you don't. If you're fortunate, your next wellness adventure involves leeches. Actual leeches. This stems from the ancient belief that madness was caused by bad blood. The solution? Remove some. Out comes the lancet or the jar of squirming creatures. A nurse, or an orderly with questionable hygiene, presses one to your skin and waits for it to latch on. You watch, lightheaded, as it swells with your blood. When it's done, they toss it aside and declare the treatment a success. You're left a pint lighter and no closer to clarity. Then come the enemas, not occasional, but scheduled. Victorian asylums were obsessed with digestion, convinced a clogged colon caused all mental illness. Agitated? Must be your bowels. Depressed? Sluggish intestines. The cure? Irrigation with cold water, administered with disturbingly cheerful indifference. No warning, no consent, just a nurse with a rubber tube and a supervisor taking notes. They claim it rebalances your system. What it really does is strip away your last shred of bodily autonomy. Hydrotherapy is another favorite. In theory, water soothes the soul. In practice, it's just another compliance tool. You might be submerged in a bath for hours, sometimes days, with only your head above water. The temperature is tepid, the room drafty, and speaking is forbidden. You lie there, limbs numb, while a nurse periodically checks you haven't drowned. This is considered progress. Complain, and they assume you need more water time. Fall asleep? That proves it's working. There's no winning, only surviving more quietly. On energetic days, you might get the cold, wet sheet pack, wrapped mummy style in freezing linen, then left on a table to cool the brain. You can't move, barely breathe. You shiver for hours, staring at the ceiling while your mind races with thoughts they'll never believe you had. This is supposed to reduce agitation. It does, by freezing the will out of you. Electricity makes an appearance too, not modern electroconvulsive therapy, but sadistic experiments. Hand-crank devices deliver currents to your scalp, spine, or, if someone's feeling creative, your genitals. No anesthesia, no real science. Just a vague hope that shocking your body will reset your brain. Convulse? That's efficacy. Vomit? They take notes. Pass out. Progress. Blistering is another classic. A chemical paste is applied to your skin, neck, spine, or chest to raise welts. The goal? Draw out illness through inflammation. The blisters are lanced and drained, sometimes repeatedly. You endure it silently because screaming gets you labeled uncooperative, and uncooperative patients go back to the restraint chair. If you're a woman, prepare for uterine treatments. Doctors believed most female problems originated in reproductive organs, so they examined, manipulated, and sometimes operated on them with alarming frequency. Pessaries, vaginal douches, internal exams, all routine. Consent? Irrelevant. Modesty? A joke. The process is clinical and humiliating. Afterward, you're expected to thank them. Psychological therapy is rare. When it happens, it's more interrogation than support. A doctor might ask how you feel, but only to confirm what he's already written. Deviate from his script, and it's delusion. Say too little? Disengaged. Too much? Obsessive. You're not meant to be understood, just categorized, then corrected. You might ask how any of this could help. Why bleed the weak? Freeze the sad? Electrify the confused? The answer is simple. It's not about healing. It's about order, control, efficiency. The asylum doesn't need you cured. It needs you quiet, manageable, and visible. If a treatment shuts you up, slows you down, or drains your spirit, it's succeeded by Victorian standards. Somewhere, a chart with your name collects notes like resistant to therapy or showing compliance. These determine whether you get more of the same or something worse. You learn to play the part, nod when expected, mutter thanks after being shocked or violated. The staff call it progress. You call it survival. None of these therapies consider your dignity. They're not based on empathy or science, just crude tools to scrape away the inconvenient parts of your psyche until only obedience remains. And if they fail, well, there's always next week's enema. Eventually, someone tells you about moral treatment. They say it like it's a gift, a turning point in your stay. You're no longer just a patient. You're part of a grand experiment in kindness, a chance to recover your reason through purpose rather than punishment. It sounds almost hopeful. No more cold tubs. No more leeches. A return to feeling human. But the truth is far darker. The original idea had good intentions, a rejection of chains and neglect in favor of structured routines, fresh air, and meaningful activity. But here, the dignity got lost. Only the structure remained. And structure, of course, meant labor. Now you're in the garden, not because you love plants, but because a clipboard-wielding administrator decided pulling weeds is good for your soul. The sun scalds your neck. The soil cracks under your knees. You're handed a rake or a trowel, sometimes just your bare hands, and ordered to dig, prune, clear paths that lead nowhere. Through it all, someone watches. Therapy must be supervised, they say. They claim gardening teaches patience and self-reliance. But you don't choose what to plant. Don't arrange the garden. Don't even taste the vegetables you harvest. Those go to the kitchen. The flowers? Cut for the administrator's office. This isn't peace. It's busy work to keep your hands from idleness. Because idle hands are the devil's workshop, and they'd rather see you blistered than thinking. Other tasks fall under moral treatment too. Laundry duty, steam clinging to your skin for days. Sewing rooms, hunched over uniforms until your fingers bleed. Men repair furniture or dig ditches. You're praised for effort, told you're improving. But make no mistake, this is unpaid labor, not leisure. The asylum runs on it. Without patient workers, there'd be no clean linens, no manicured hedges for donors to admire. You're a cog in a machine that calls itself compassionate while grinding you down. On paper, moral treatment includes conversation and gentle encouragement. Maybe a board game or Bible reading. In reality, these are rare and tightly controlled. Most interactions are with staff assessing, not listening. Speak freely. They take notes. Stay silent. That's noted too. You're not having a dialogue. You're being evaluated. There might be a reading room with sermons and moral pamphlets. Fiction is banned. Imagination is dangerous. Music, if allowed, is pious and joyless. No childhood songs. No laughter. The point isn't to lift your spirit. It's to reshape it. You must be orderly, obedient, grateful. Garden with reverence. Speak with humility. You're not here to be yourself. You're here to become their version of sane. The staff smile when you whisper, "Thank you," after 12 hours of farm labor. They note your progress. But this doesn't mean you're healing. It means you've stopped resisting. Occasionally, inspectors tour the grounds, marveling at how industrious everyone looks. What a fine idea, they say, watching you kneel in the dirt with raw hands. They don't see your slumped shoulders at the bell. Don't notice the blisters. Don't hear how you lie awake at night, too exhausted to remember what joy felt like. And when you slow down, when your grip falters or your eyes drift toward the horizon, no one asks what's wrong. You're disciplined, a sharper tone, a smaller dinner portion, a note in your file, patient, uncooperative, shows signs of idleness. You start to understand. Moral treatment isn't about treating you morally. It's about making your behavior palatable, your spirit subdued. Question it, and they remind you it's for your own good. That routine builds character. That planting cabbages in silence is a vital step to recovery. And if that doesn't work, they remind you of the alternatives, the restraint chair, the ice baths, the electricity. Suddenly, gardening doesn't seem so bad. So you return to it. Dig, prune, rake gravel paths going nowhere. You pretend it's working, even as your body screams otherwise. You stop dreaming of freedom. Start dreaming of softer soil. Maybe, you think, if you dig deep enough, you'll find something buried. A key, a door, the self you forgot. But all you find is more dirt. From the moment you arrive, you're told the staff are here to help, trained, compassionate professionals. But it doesn't take long to see the truth. Most don't belong here. Or perhaps they belong here too well. They are the gatekeepers of your body, your time, and in some cases, your very sanity. Start with the attendants, the lowest rung of authority, yet the ones you see most. These men and women enforce the asylum's daily rhythms. They bring meals, escort you to the yard, stand in corners watching like you're a teetering vase about to fall. Some are bored. Some are bitter. Most are just exhausted, underpaid, undertrained, and drowning in their own futility. Turnover is high. Patience is short. No one teaches them de-escalation, just how to lock doors and write reports. It shows. If you're lucky, you'll find a staff member who still remembers you're human. They might sneak you extra bread, speak in a normal tone instead of the voice reserved for livestock. These rare souls exist, but they're the exception, not the rule. Most days, you're managed by people who seem either afraid of you or disgusted by your continued breathing. You quickly learn who can be spoken to, who must be avoided, and who's a coin toss depending on whether their breakfast was cold. Then there are the nurses, assuming your asylum has any. In theory, medical professionals. In practice, often women hired with no training, handed a syringe, and told to keep the ward quiet. Some arrived hopeful, imagining healing and dignity. But the endless noise, the underfunded filth, the daily proximity to suffering, it erodes something vital. They become mechanical. You're a chart, a dosage, a pulse to monitor, not a voice to hear. They administer enemas and cold baths without flinching, not necessarily from cruelty, but detachment. It's good for you, they've been told. If you cry when they cut your hair or flinch at restraints, that's proof the treatment is working. Any doubts they harbor, stay quiet. Doubt is expensive here. Compassion gets you reprimanded. Above them stand the doctors, men in waistcoats with pocket watches and unshakable faith in their own omniscience. Most have never spent a day inside a patient's mind, yet they diagnose with divine certainty. Their degrees are real, usually, but the science isn't. Psychology is in its infancy here. Psychiatry is guesswork dressed in Latin. They walk the halls with clipboards, observing you like an interesting, but ultimately insignificant animal. Your interactions are brief, maybe minutes per week. You're asked about dreams or moods, but only to confirm their preconceptions. Say you feel better? Are you delusional? Admit you feel worse? They increase your dosage. Every word is held to the light of assumption. Question their authority, even gently? That's noncompliance. There are specialists too, or people claiming to be. A phrenologist measures your skull bumps to assess moral weaknesses. A mesmerist tries to hypnotize the madness away. These fringe practitioners are welcomed because the real doctors are desperate. The line between science and superstition is thin here, and you're the test subject. At the top sits the superintendent. You'll likely never meet him, but his influence is everywhere. He controls budgets, staffing, rules. He answers only to a board that cares about two things: efficiency and appearances. Quiet halls, balanced books, then all must be well. Whether you're healing or unraveling doesn't appear in the reports. Of course, some staff enjoy their work too much. They relish the power, the way you flinch when they raise their voice, the silence that follows their footsteps. These are the ones who invent rules just to watch you struggle, who tighten straps an extra notch, who lean close not to comfort, but to remind you they can. Try to report them? You won't be believed. The system protects its own. You're the patient. They're the staff. Case closed. Then there are those who do nothing, who see cruelty and look away. Not evil, just numb. They've learned speaking up changes nothing, and that numbness spreads. One day someone forgets your name. The next, they forget to feed you. Eventually, you forget how to ask. The staff may not all be monsters, but they're not your allies either. Overworked, undertrained, trapped in a system that values control over compassion. Some are broken, some are brutal, most are just tired. And in the end, it doesn't matter why they do what they do. It only matters that you're the one locked in the room while they hold the key. You're not alone in the asylum. This truth hits you early in the hallway echoes, the dining hall murmurs, the muffled sobs seeping through walls at night. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of others are trapped here with you, each carrying their own private torment. Some arrived weeks ago. Some have been here so long they've forgotten how to form full sentences. Some don't speak at all. The people around you aren't what you expected. Not all are dangerous. Not all are broken. But all are imprisoned, just like you. There's no real separation by diagnosis. The categories are fluid, the space limited. So you might sleep beside a man who believes he's the king of France, eat breakfast across from a woman who hasn't blinked in an hour, and be followed down the corridor by someone whispering prayers to the ceiling. The ward becomes a surreal tapestry of fractured realities overlapping in unpredictable ways. You move through it cautiously, like wading through deep water, careful not to disturb what you don't understand. Some patients are loud, unapologetically so. They moan, curse, hum. Their voices chase you wherever you go. Some repeat the same phrase for hours. Others scream names of children, of saints, of people who may not exist. You grow accustomed to it, but never comfortable. The human brain isn't meant to ignore such sounds forever. They seep into your dreams, your thoughts, until you can't tell which cries were real and which were yours. Others are silent, more unsettling in a way. They sit in corners, stand by windows, lie on beds staring at ceilings as if trying to dissolve into the walls. You pass them in the hall and they don't flinch, don't even blink. Some rock rhythmically, like waves on a stagnant sea. Others press fingers to lips or eyes in private rituals. They're present but not present. Whatever part of them once faced outward has long since turned in. You begin recognizing faces. Not friends. The asylum discourages friendship, but fixtures. The woman who mutters nursery rhymes while sweeping. The man who always asks, "Is it Sunday?" regardless of the day. The young girl who startles at sudden movements. You learn their patterns, their triggers. Learn how to avoid them, and how to avoid becoming them. Violence happens, but rarely without warning. It builds in clenched jaws, trembling hands, shoulders tightening before the lash comes. And when it erupts, it's not always from the expected ones. Sometimes it's the quiet patient who can't take the stench anymore, or the one who snaps at the weight of another identical day. The orderlies intervene swiftly with straps, sedatives, force. You watch and learn what not to do. Then there are those you can't comprehend at all. The ones who laugh at nothing, converse with invisible people, seem possessed by something so internal no outside force could reach them. You feel pity sometimes, fear other times, but mostly grief because you don't know how close you are to becoming them, or if you already have. You hear stories, whispers traded between beds, passed in the yard. That woman was a pianist. That man a professor. Someone else had a bakery, a family, spoke 4 languages. Some tales may be true, some not, but it doesn't matter. The past holds no weight here. You're no longer defined by what you were, but by how still you can sit, how quiet you can stay. Privacy doesn't exist. You sleep, eat, bathe when allowed, within earshot of others. When someone has an episode, everyone hears. When someone dies, everyone feels the absence. It's a shared isolation, paradoxical but true. Together, yet never connected. The staff discourage bonds. Too distracting. Too risky. You're meant to coexist without attachment. And yet, small gestures happen. A steadying hand on a shoulder. A crust of bread slipped under a blanket. A whispered "thank you" in the dark. These aren't rebellions. They're reminders. Beneath the diagnoses and rules, something human remains. But it's fragile, and you don't know how long it will last. Over time, patterns emerge. Some patients improve not by healing, but by perfecting performance. They learn what staff want to see: steady hands, downcast eyes, perfectly folded clothes. They say the right words at the right time, not because they believe them, but because it buys peace. You consider trying it. You probably will. Others deteriorate. The muttering grows louder. The rocking faster. Memory gaps widen. Some stop eating. Some stop speaking. Some are taken to the quiet ward and never return. You wonder if they're dead. Wonder if that would be kinder. You tell yourself you're not like them, but your thoughts still make sense. But as days blur into weeks, as the same cries echo off the same walls, your certainty frays. You start talking to yourself, just a little. Forgetting things, just momentarily. Staring a second too long. And when you see someone else do the same, you look away, because you can't bear to see your reflection in their hollow eyes. This is your community now, a chaotic symphony of screams and silence. No one chose to be here, but here you all are, sharing space, sharing pain, waiting for someone to open a door that may never unlock. And slowly, silently, you begin to wonder, if freedom ever came, would you still recognize it? If you're a woman in a Victorian asylum, your path here was likely shorter than a man's, and your chances of leaving far slimmer. This isn't accidental. It's baked into the system, designed by men who decided what constituted illness versus improper femininity. Often, they were the same thing. Your gender wasn't just part of your identity, it was your diagnosis. You could be committed for too much emotion or not enough. For weeping too long after a child's death, or not weeping at all. For speaking your mind, reading forbidden books, refusing marriage, asking too many questions. You might find yourself in a straitjacket not because you were violent, but because you didn't stop talking when ordered. Anything making you inconvenient to husband, family, or society could be labeled madness. Once inside, everything revolves around your body, your mind, your pain, your story, all filtered through the lens of biology. Doctors speak of your womb as if it were a rogue animal needing cages. They blame mood swings on ovaries, anxiety on your cycle, grief on a displaced uterus. It sounds ludicrous, but it's treated as medical fact. You're not unwell, you're simply a woman, and that itself is pathological. Therapies reflect this belief. You're more likely to endure female-specific treatments, mini-invasive and humiliating, performed without consent. Pelvic massages to induce hysterical paroxysms. Vaginal douches with icy water. Uterine exams that feel more like punishment than diagnosis. Some women are forced into surgeries, hysterectomies, clitoridectomies, all under the guise of healing the mind by altering the body. Flinch or resist. That just proves the procedure's necessity. Your clothing is controlled. Your hair may be shorn. You're scrubbed raw, not for comfort, but to meet someone else's cleanliness standards. You must embody Victorian womanhood. Modest, passive, obedient. But appear too dull? That's melancholia. Too lively? Hysteria. Too sensual? Moral decay. Too independent? Insanity. Your relationships with other women are monitored. Affection is discouraged. Friendship is a distraction. Any hint of same-sex attraction brings accusations of unnatural attachment, a label that sticks forever. You learn to withhold kindness, even when it might be the only thing keeping you sane. If you're a mother, your children are taken. If you're a wife, your husband's signature alone brought you here. If you're neither, your fate was decided by a father, brother, or male doctor who knew best. The legal system assumes you're incapable of managing your own life. Once committed, your words hold no weight. Protest. Write letters. No one is obligated to believe you, and most won't. Life in the female ward has its own rules. You're expected to sew, clean, mimic a respectable household rather than a prison. Chores are framed as therapy, but it's forced domesticity. Fold linens. Mend uniforms. Wash sheets stained with other women suffering. Complain? You're difficult. Refuse? Restraints await. You're being remade smaller, quieter, more palatable. The violence here isn't always loud. Not just slaps or sudden punishments, but the slow erosion of yourself. How your opinions become symptoms. How your trauma is ignored unless it fits a narrative absolving those who hurt you. You may have arrived after abuse, loss, surviving the unbearable, but here, your suffering isn't a story. It's a defect. Staff treat you differently too. Some are paternalistic, others dismissive. Many are invasive. Male doctors perform exams without warning. Male attendants oversee baths. It's clinical, they say. You're overreacting. But you feel the power imbalance every time someone enters your space unannounced, discusses your body as if it's not yours, asks questions that are really judgments in disguise. Even recovery is gendered. To be considered for release, you must perform femininity to their satisfaction. Speak softly. Avoid direct eye contact. Not at every statement. Express gratitude, even after humiliation. Master the art of smiling on cue. Be pliable. Apologetic. The goal isn't wellness, it's harmlessness. Or at least convincing them you are. Fail this performance? Remain outspoken? Show anger? Question rules? You'll stay for years. Maybe forever. The records will claim you're unfit for society, your progress inadequate. But what they really mean is, you haven't surrendered. Haven't handed over your dignity in the precise, digestible shape they demanded. Men in asylums are punished for behavior. Women are punished for existing wrong. You needn't lash out to be dangerous. Just occupy space in the incorrect mood. And once that label attaches, it follows you everywhere, down halls, into therapy rooms, through medical notes. It clings like the stench of disinfectant, lingering long after scrubbing. To be a woman here is to live a paradox. Be soft, but not fragile. Quiet, but not too quiet. Sad, but never inconvenient. And the moment you fail this impossible balance, the system decides you're unfit for the sane world. So it tucks you away, locks the door, and calls this progress. By now you've realized fairness isn't part of the asylum's mission, but what might shock you is how much your suffering depends on the thickness of your family's purse. Though every patient wears the same blank expression and chokes down the same tasteless porridge, not all are equal. A sharp, deliberate line divides paupers from private patients. And you know immediately which side you're on. If you're a pauper, you entered through the back door. No carriage, no kindly administrator. You were processed like livestock, recorded, stripped, deloused, and dumped in the pauper wing. It's colder here, louder. The walls sweat stains. Bed stands shoulder to shoulder, their blankets thin as regret. You share everything, soap, combs, the same stale air. Privacy is a joke no one bothers to tell. The ward smells of damp wool and despair. If something breaks, it stays broken. The staff assigned to your wing are the least qualified, most impatient. They treat you like a problem, not a person. Hesitate to obey? They tighten their grip. You're here to be contained, not consulted. Your paperwork might lack even a pretense of diagnosis. Sometimes poverty is reason enough. Your treatments are chosen for cost, not efficacy. You get the cheapest drugs, the harshest labor, the oldest restraints. You're first to be strapped down, last to be released. You scrub floors, haul coal, weed gardens under a pitiless sun. The asylum couldn't function without pauper labor, and who cares if you have better things to do? Fall seriously ill? They might move you to the infirmary if they deem you worth the resources. Usually, you're not. Then there are the private patients. You glimpse them sometimes, strolling separate paths in cleaner clothes, escorted by obsequious staff. Their wards are quieter, their linens fresher. Their meals include actual meat. If you meet their eyes, some look away, others stare like you're street trash that blew in. Which, in a way, you are. Here, you're not just ill, you're poor and ill. That makes you the control group in someone else's experiment. Private patients are usually rich embarrassments, a bookish wife, an eccentric heir, a raving uncle who threatened the family fortune. They get doctors who pretend to listen, rooms with real furniture, small luxuries like sugared tea and supervised visits. If they improve or fake it well, they're discharged with handshakes. You'll be lucky if anyone recalls your name. Overheard conversations twist the knife. A nurse calls a private patient tragic for reading too many novels. That word, tragic, only applies where money's involved. Your story isn't tragic. It's inconvenient, messy, disposable. No one calls a pauper's madness tragic. They call it hereditary weakness or the wages of sin. There's always an explanation when you lack coin. The treatments broadcast this hierarchy. While you're scrubbed raw in an ice bath for defiance, the private patient across the hall journals her thoughts. While you blister your hands in the vegetable patch, she paints in a sunlit room with windows that actually open. You're both technically patients, but only one is considered worth saving. Even the notes in your files diverge. Hers will say nervous exhaustion or delicate constitution. Yours will bark hysterical or incorrigible. Those words stick, justifying harsher treatments, explaining why you don't improve, predicting your future. You're not expected to recover, just to shut up. Release, if it comes, is also class-coded. A private patient might exit in months, declared cured, with polite lies about her progress. You could rot here for years, forgotten, shuffled between wards as space demands. When your bed's needed, they'll dump you on the streets or in a workhouse, not because you're well, but because you're no longer their problem. Yet sometimes, the illusion cracks. You notice private patients walking with the same stiff shoulders, hear the same fear in their voices. Because the asylum doesn't truly care about anyone, it cares about money, about appearances, about order. But let's be clear, class buys comfort. It buys dignity. It buys the difference between being restrained and being confined, between therapy and punishment, between recovery and containment. These distinctions may seem small on paper, but when you're scrubbing a rich woman's bedsheets while she sips tea, they feel like the width of the world. Eventually, the thought of escape creeps in, not as a formal plan, but as a quiet whisper during sleepless nights. No one talks about discharge as a real possibility. You've seen what happens to those who ask too often. This is different, a fleeting fantasy when you watch a sparrow land on the barred window, wings unclipped, free to go anywhere. The building isn't designed for freedom. From the outside, it might resemble a grand estate, but inside it's all locks, bolts, and layers of quiet control. Doors don't just close, they lock automatically. Keys jingle constantly on staff belts, a sound as ever-present as your own heartbeat. Windows are high, narrow, often barred. Even if you shattered the glass, the opening wouldn't fit more than your arm. Not impossible, just brutally improbable. You study the hallways, long, straight, endless, but they only lead to more locked doors. You memorize patrol rotations, staff shifts, the seconds between night watch rounds. Maybe there's a blind spot, a gap in their vigilance. But even as you plot, you know the truth. This machine is arrogant, but never sloppy. Sometimes someone tries anyway. You hear the whispers, a patient who bolted during garden time, another who slipped out of the workroom. One made it to the woods before they caught her. Staff recount these stories as warnings, but you hear something else, the faintest echo of hope. Until the ending. There's always an ending. They're caught every time. Sometimes immediately. Sometimes after hours of searching, found shivering in stables or curled behind hedges, barefoot and breathless. Rarely, one reaches the road, but never beyond. They're always dragged back. And when they return, they're not whole, just a strapped-down body on a gurney, drugged into silence, bleeding from somewhere unseen. Punishment is swift and unrecorded. The lucky ones get isolation, a week in darkness with bread and water. The rest face restraints, ice baths, sudden adjustments to their medication. A new note appears in their file, danger to self and others. That's all it takes to erase any chance of release. From then on, every complaint, every flinch is filtered through the lens of your instability. Wanting freedom becomes proof of madness. The staff are always watching, always listening. They don't trust you, and certainly not each other. Linger too near an unlocked door? Someone notices. Ask about delivery cart schedules? That earns you a transfer to a stricter ward. You think you're clever, but the system has seen it all before. A century of escape attempts has taught these walls how to hold tighter. Even if you had help, it wouldn't matter. No one's staging a rescue. Your family either believes you belong here or has moved on. Friends receive polished letters claiming you're treated humanely. No one suspects your real words are censored, your voice flattened into medical jargon. You're not a person here, just a number in a long hallway. And numbers don't escape. They relapse. So you stop planning exits. Stop testing window hinges or memorizing guard rotations. The fantasies don't vanish, they just lose their edges, becoming soft ghosts that trail behind you, silent. But the knowledge remains. Someone tried. However briefly, they saw the sky without bars, felt unfiltered air in their lungs. You envy that moment more than you fear the consequences. Because even in failure, they remembered what it was to want something. You wonder what the staff think when they catch a runner. Triumphant? Annoyed? Do they see a desperate person or just paperwork to complete? Maybe they don't think at all. Maybe that's how they sleep, by believing anyone who tries to flee must belong here. The cruelest part? You start believing it too. Not all at once, but grain by grain. You tell yourself escape is pointless, that you'd be caught, that maybe you're not ready. These aren't your thoughts, you know that, but you think them anyway. It's easier than facing the truth. You're trapped. Always were. So you don't escape. You survive. You nod when spoken to. You walk the same halls, eat the same slop, force smiles when asked how you're feeling. And when the wind rattles a loose shutter, or a bird sings just beyond the wall, you allow yourself one fragile thought. Not today, but maybe someday. You probably assumed asylum life would mean rest. After all, wasn't that the justification? A place to heal from whatever breakdown or breach of decorum landed you here. What you didn't realize is that from the moment those doors close behind you, you cease being just a patient. You become a resource, a vital cog in the machine that keeps this place running. No one calls it work. They use prettier terms: therapeutic activity, moral occupation. They claim it builds structure, fosters routine, restores mental health. The truth is simpler. The asylum has endless chores and a threadbare budget. Someone must scrub the floors, haul the coal, boil the laundry. That someone is you, and every other patient who can lift a mop or turn a mangle. The laundry operation alone could drown a soul. Hundreds of sheets, uniforms, and towels cycle through weekly, none washing themselves. You're assigned shifts without consultation. The laundry room steams like a hell's antechamber, pipes hissing overhead, metal tubs clanging against stone walls. You sort soiled linens by hand, scrubbing stains from fabric long past saving, feeding cloth through industrial rollers seemingly designed to crush fingers along with wrinkles. The air reeks of old soap and mildew. If you're fortunate, the water's lukewarm. If not, it's cold and already gray with yesterday's labor. No wages, of course. You're not an employee, you're a patient. Patients don't need pay. At best, you might earn an extra bread crust or a muttered decent job. Occasionally your name gets noted for good behavior, but no amount of toil shortens your stay. Your sweat just ensures the administrator's blankets stay clean and their ledgers stay black. If not laundry, you're sent elsewhere. Some patients sweep corridors until their spines curve. Others haul coal buckets that blister palms, or work kitchens boiling tasteless gruel. Stronger men shovel garden beds, plant vegetables they'll never taste. You may be told this reconnects you with nature, but really, it just feeds the asylum on the cheap. You're not gardening. You're subsidizing your own imprisonment. Work is divided by gender and perceived ability. Women stitch in sewing rooms, hunched over mending tables until their eyes blur. If seams aren't perfect, garments get thrown back without a word. Fail too often, and you're demoted to floor scrubbing, knees on stone, bucket in hand. Men get heavier labor, repairing furniture, digging ditches, sometimes even constructing new asylum wings. Yes, patients literally build the walls that will cage more patients. There's a poetry to it, if your taste runs to cruelty. A hierarchy exists among workers, though never acknowledged. The strongest, most obedient patients get the most grueling assignments, hauling coal, digging graves. They're trusted to move freely within limits, given slightly better rations, thicker socks. At first you might envy them, until you notice their limp that never heals, their hollow stares when handed another shovel. They're not privileged, they're broken in. Some literate patients get clerical work, copying notes, organizing files. This is considered a privilege, but it's still unpaid servitude. You're still maintaining the system that cages you, hoping diligence might buy mercy. It rarely does. All this gets framed as kindness. You're not being exploited, you're engaged in your recovery. Never mind that refusal isn't an option. That resistance is labeled a symptom. Complain of pain? That's malingering. Grow too quiet? Catatonia. Time to double your dosage. What's worse is how outsiders applaud it. Benefactors tour the gardens and sewing rooms, marveling at how industrious everyone looks. What splendid therapy, they exclaim, watching patients bend over vegetable patches, hands raw, backs aching. They don't ask if you volunteered. Don't wonder why your eyes never meet theirs. The asylum depends on this illusion, on your invisible labor making the place seem humane. You start understanding the awful joke. Without patience, the asylum would collapse. Who'd launder the sheets, cook the meals, weed the gardens? You're the janitor, the maid, the groundskeeper, all while labeled too unstable to tie your own shoes. They'll never credit your labor, never compensate it. At best, good behavior might earn you fewer punishments, a less vicious orderly, an extra blanket in winter. But the ledger doesn't care how many floors you've scrubbed. It only notes whether you smiled during inspection, nodded at the right times. So you keep working, keep hauling, stitching, digging, not because it helps, but because refusal lands you somewhere worse. And because some stubborn part of you still hopes, if you prove useful enough, long enough, maybe, just maybe, someone will finally call you sane. But that's not how this works. In the asylum, usefulness isn't a ticket out. It's just another chain keeping you in. They call it progress, a breakthrough, a modern miracle. The doctors speak of new treatments with gleaming eyes, as if you should feel privileged to be their test subject. But after restraints, leeches, and endless enemas, you've learned to distrust anything labeled advanced. Here, treatments don't evolve to become kinder, just more efficient at hollowing you out. Take the ice bath. It's existed for decades, but now it's systematized, not punishment officially, but therapy. Without warning, you're submerged in a coffin-like tube of water so cold your lungs seize. You can't scream, can't breathe. The staff call this calming, claiming it reduces agitation, regulates circulation, clarifies the mind. What it truly does is shock you into submission. After a few sessions, you stop raising your voice, not because you're better, but because you fear the water's bite. If the ice doesn't break you, they escalate. Enter electrotherapy, a humming machine wheeled in like some medieval torture device rebranded as science. Electrodes clamped to your temples or spine. Just a tingle, they say, but sometimes the current jumps, scorching skin. Flinch or cry out. That's resistance, not pain. Side effects, headaches, seizures, memory gaps. are minor considerations. You learn to sit still, to pretend it helps. Then comes the hydrotherapy bed, a padded coffin where you're swaddled in wet sheets, soaked in frigid or scalding water depending on their whims. Agitated? Ice to numb you. Depressed? Boiling to stimulate. Strapped down for hours. You can't move, can't speak, can only listen to your heartbeat slow. They claim being wrapped like an infant is therapeutic. You know better. It's just another way to keep you silent and still. But the crown jewel of their progress. Insulin shock therapy, the cutting edge of psychiatric cruelty. Carefully measured injections plunge your blood sugar until you convulse, lose consciousness, hover near death. Then they revive you with glucose, calling this near-death experience resetting your mind. Catatonic patients might mumble afterward. The doctors cheer this as success. But you've seen the aftermath, the tremors, the vomiting, the ones who wake forgetting their own names. No one asks if it was worth it. The quiet that follows is proof enough for them. These procedures are never explained. You're not consulted, you're informed, if at all. A nurse appears. Time for your session. Ask what it's for, and the answer is vague. Nerves, behavior, whatever sounds medical enough to stifle protest. Refuse? They hold you down and inject you anyway. Sometimes they drug you first so you won't remember. The paperwork will read, consented under supervision. There are whispers of worse to come. Bleeding is out of fashion, but surgeons eye new frontiers. Extracting teeth to relieve pressure. Cauterizing nasal cavities to reduce stimulation. The boldest murmur about brain surgery. Cutting into skulls to adjust emotions at the source. You hear these words and taste bile. In places like this, being on medicine's cutting edge means being the first body they cut open. Yet they document it all meticulously. Publish papers filled with Latin terms and glowing reports. Present at conferences, proud of their work. They don't see you, they see results. Quieter wards, fewer outbursts, blank stares they can call serenity if they squint hard enough. No one measures what you lose with each treatment. No ledger tracks the jokes you forget, the songs that slip away, the way your hands now tremble too badly to button your shirt. You overhear them in hallways, discussing patients like broken clocks, responded well to insulin, may benefit from extended isolation. Your name surfaces occasionally, not as a person, but as a case to be managed. You start realizing their progress isn't about healing. It's erasure, sanding down your rough edges until nothing sticks out, until you stop asking questions, until you become just another silent figure in a hallway of silent figures. Some patients start believing the treatments help or pretend to. They parrot the staff. The baths clear my thoughts. The electricity helps. Sometimes this act buys them peace. Fewer sessions, softer words. Other times, it backfires. See? They admit it works. They need more. There's no logic here. The system doesn't care what's true, only what's manageable. And so you change. You forget things, small at first, then important. You flinch when doors open. You speak less, not for lack of thoughts, but because words cost too much. The sting of needles, the shock of cold water, they barely register now. You've stopped asking why. That's not recovery. That's surrender. But the doctors smile, scribbling, patient calm and cooperative in your file. The system congratulates itself on another success. And you sit emptier than before, wondering when you stopped caring about the difference. The most dangerous place in the asylum isn't the restraint room or the ice baths. It's the treatment chamber with its clean floors and humming machines, where they take pieces of you one by one and call it medicine. And the worst part? You let them, because the alternative is worse. So when they come again with needles and promises of peace, you don't resist. You walk, you sit, you nod, and as the world blurs for the 20th, 50th, 100th time, you try to remember what it felt like to be whole, before they called it sickness and carved it out of you. The fading happens slowly, like ink dissolving in water. At first, it's just the small things, forgetting what day it is, whether you've eaten breakfast, if that muffled scream you heard was yesterday or last month. You tell yourself this is normal. Time behaves differently here. But really, your mind is shrinking to fit the contours of your cage. You stop counting the weeks. Was it winter when you arrived? You remember frost on the windows, but which year? The seasons blur. Cold mornings blend together. Same porridge, same cracked bowl, same distant wailing 2 cells down. The past becomes a tangle of half-recalled sensations. The smell of cold dust, the ache of a straitjacket's embrace, the metallic taste of fear. Then the details start slipping. The color of your childhood bedroom, the sound of your mother's laugh, the way sunlight used to fall across your kitchen table. These memories come less often now, and when they do, they feel like stories someone else told you. Hazy, distorted, untrustworthy. You let them go. Remembering hurts more than forgetting. Soon, even the edges of yourself grow indistinct. You struggle to recall your age, whether you ever married, if you had children. The face in the mirror, when there is a mirror, seems unfamiliar, not just changed, but belonging to a stranger. The hollow eyes, the slumped shoulders, the mouth that never smiles unless ordered. This can't be you. Yet it is. One day, someone calls your name, and it takes a heartbeat too long to respond. Not because you didn't hear, but because you're no longer sure that name is yours. The syllables feel foreign, like a part you played long ago in a play that's since closed. That night, you whisper it to yourself, testing. It doesn't fit anymore. It's just a label now, scribbled on a chart at the foot of your bed. The staff still use your name, of course, when giving orders, when marking you present. But there's no warmth in it, just formality. Patient Henderson, stand. Miss Level, eat. You're a file to update, a space to fill, a problem to manage. You start responding to tone rather than words. A sharp bark means hurry. A flat command means sit still. A hand on your elbow means move. Language becomes unnecessary. Instinct takes over. Your body obeys while your mind drifts elsewhere. Your memories fracture into shards. A train whistle in the distance. The smell of fresh bread. A joke that once made you laugh until your sides ached. But you can't remember who told it or why it was funny. You start to wonder how many of your memories are real and how many you invented to fill the void. The other patients blur too. You recognize faces, routines, the man who hums the same 4 notes endlessly, but names escape you. You stopped asking. You nod to the woman who rocks by the window. Make room for the one who whispers to her hands. You pass bread crusts under the table, trade glances that say everything and nothing, but you don't offer your name. Don't ask for theirs. It seems pointless. You're all fading together. The doctors say you're stable now. You don't act out. You're compliant, cooperative, a model patient. They call this improvement. But you know the truth. You haven't gotten better. You've disappeared. You don't get angry anymore because you don't feel much of anything. You don't cry because you're not sure what's worth crying over. You've become quiet, empty, manageable, and they mistake this emptiness for peace. The worst part? You're starting to believe it too. You tell yourself your silence is strength, your numbness, maturity, that the parts of you that used to laugh, rage, question, those were the sickness. This hollow calm. This is health. You forget that opinions are things people have, that defiance ever existed, that you were once someone who cared. The mirror doesn't matter. The name doesn't matter. The memories stop coming at all. You wake. You eat. You walk the halls. You sit when told. The days loop like a broken music box, playing the same warped tune. You know where to be at any given moment. You don't question, don't wonder. And if someone asked, really asked, who you are, you wouldn't have an answer. You're no longer sure you ever did. This is what healing looks like in the Victorian Asylum. Not recovery, not understanding, not even peace, just stillness. You no longer scream, no longer fight. You've mastered the art of nodding, of folding your hands just so, of murmuring thank you when they slide a tray across the table. The staff smile at your calm, your remarkable progress. What they don't say, what they'll never admit, is that the version of you they wanted has replaced the one who arrived. The woman who wept for her children, the man who raged at injustice, the person who asked too many questions. That person has been buried under layers of silence and routine. You're not cured. You're quiet. And in here, that's enough. The institution doesn't measure health in joy or clarity. It weighs compliance, obedience, the precision of your daily rhythms. You've become predictable, and so you're deemed well. That your spirit has been scraped down to the bone doesn't concern them. You're no longer a danger to yourself or others. Not because some wound inside you has closed, but because you've stopped reaching for anything at all. You've stopped hoping. And without hope, there's nothing left to resist. Maybe one day they'll discharge you, hand you clothes that don't fit, a note that says recovered, and push you out the gates. You'll blink against the sun, your feet unsure on the cobblestones. But even if your body leaves this place, the asylum stays. It lingers in your habits, how you flinch at jangling keys, how you lower your voice before speaking, how you never quite meet anyone's eye. They may have stopped locking the door, but they trained you not to try it anyway. And if you never leave, if you stay within these walls until the last flicker of yourself gutters out, no one will mark the difference. You'll be remembered as cooperative, manageable, a patient who adjusted well to institutional life. And in the end, that's all the asylum ever wanted from you. Not healing, not happiness, just the absence of trouble.